Story 2. In 1967, a young couple, Jane and Mark Hensley, moved into an old Victorian home in rural Pennsylvania. They were enchanted by the house's charm, tall ceilings, intricate woodwork, and large bay windows. But from the very first night, they noticed odd occurrences. The sound of faint whispering echoed through the walls. At first, they thought it was just the creaks and groans of an old house settling. However, the whispers grew louder over time. Jane swore she could make out words, pleading and desperate. "Help me," it seemed to say. Mark dismissed it as her imagination until he, too, began hearing it late at night. Determined to get to the bottom of it, he searched the entire house, even crawling through the cramped basement, but found nothing unusual. One evening, while Mark was at work, Jane heard the whispering grow into anguished cries. She followed the sound to the parlor and was horrified to see one of the walls bulging unnaturally, as if something inside was trying to push its way out. Terrified, she fled the house and called Mark. When he returned, the wall looked perfectly normal. The couple decided to renovate, hoping it would ease their unease. But as they tore down the old plaster in the parlor, they made a grisly discovery: a skeleton wrapped in tattered fabric crammed into the wall. The police identified it as a missing woman from the 1920s who had vanished without a trace. After the body was removed, the whispers stopped, but Jane and Mark never felt comfortable in the house again and moved out shortly after. To this day, neighbors claim to hear faint crying coming from the house, as if the walls themselves still remember her suffering. Story 3. In 1983, Tom Halston bought an antique mirror at an estate sale. It was ornate, its gold frame carved with intricate designs, and he thought it would be a perfect centerpiece for his dining room. From the moment he hung it on the wall, though, he felt uneasy. At first, it was subtle, the sensation of being watched as he passed by. Then, the real horrors began. Late one night, Tom awoke to the sound of muffled whispers. Bleary-eyed, he wandered into the dining room and froze. In the mirror's reflection, he saw a figure standing behind him, a pale woman with sunken eyes and a mournful expression. He spun around, but the room was empty. When he turned back to the mirror, the figure was gone. Convinced he was imagining things, Tom tried to ignore the incidents, but they escalated. Objects in the room would move when he wasn't looking. The reflection in the mirror often didn't match reality. Furniture would appear distorted, and sometimes the woman would be there, staring at him. One evening, as he sat staring into the mirror, he heard her voice clearly for the first time. "Let me out." Her tone was desperate, almost pleading. Tom tried to smash the mirror with a hammer, but the glass wouldn't crack. Instead, his own reflection grinned at him, though he wasn't smiling. Panicked, Tom removed the mirror and left it at the curb for the garbage truck. But even after it was gone, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He sold the house soon after, leaving no forwarding address. The mirror was never seen again, but some say objects from that estate sale carried a curse, spreading terror wherever they went. Story 4. In 1994, college student Emily Saunders rented an old apartment in Boston. It was small but cozy, and the price was perfect for her tight budget. The landlord warned her about the quirks of the building: creaky floors, drafty windows. But Emily didn't mind. She was thrilled to have a place of her own. A few weeks after moving in, she noticed something strange. The apartment seemed larger than it should be. The layout didn't match the building's exterior, and there was a strange draft coming from behind a bookcase. One night, curiosity got the better of her, and she pushed the bookcase aside, revealing a hidden door. The door was old, its wood warped and splintered. It opened into a small, windowless room with peeling wallpaper and a musty smell. In the center of the room was a single chair facing a wall, as if someone had spent hours sitting there, staring. Emily felt an overwhelming sense of dread and quickly left, resolving to ask the landlord about it. The landlord grew pale when she mentioned the room. "That door was supposed to be sealed," he said, refusing to elaborate. That night, Emily woke to the sound of footsteps pacing back and forth in the hidden room. She summoned the courage to check, but the room was empty, the chair now turned toward the door. Over the next few weeks, the disturbances escalated. The sound of whispering and scratching came from the room at all hours. One night, she found the chair sitting in her living room despite having locked the hidden door. Terrified, Emily moved out immediately. The landlord sealed the door again, but new tenants report strange noises coming from behind the bookcase. None have stayed longer than a few months, and the room remains a mystery no one dares to unravel. Story 1. In 1941, an old man began hearing weird noises in his home, but each time he went to check, he found nothing. He didn't believe much in the supernatural, so he plainly figured it was just the house settling. Unfortunately, he was very wrong. The strange incidents continued for 5 weeks before the old man, Philip Peters, found something standing at his fridge. It appeared to be an abnormally slender, tall man, and Peters panicked, swinging his cane at it. However, the intruder swung back, knocking him to the ground. He then continued to bludgeon Peters until it was clear he was no longer alive. Peters' body was discovered later that day, but the police found no signs of forced entry and even noted that all the windows and doors were still locked. They did find an old trap door in the ceiling of a closet, but determined that it was physically impossible for anyone to enter it. Therefore, they never checked inside. Philip Peters' wife returned to the house soon after his death and hired a housekeeper to help her out. But once again, strange incidents kept occurring. They soon became convinced that the home was haunted, which led to the housekeeper's resignation and the widows moving away. But even after the house was vacated, the neighbors still noticed apparitions in the windows and lights flickering on in the middle of the night. But whenever they knocked, nobody would answer. After receiving so many calls about this house, the Denver police decided to station 2 officers outside to keep an eye on it. And late one night, they finally spotted the figure themselves. They ran inside and immediately heard a door handle move on the 2nd floor. They bolted after the sound and made it just in time to spot a pair of legs climbing up into the closet trap door. They reached inside, caught the man by his legs, and yanked him back out. The man's name was Theodore Coneys, and he'd come to be known as the Denver Spider-Man. He confessed to the murder of Philip Peters and admitted to living in the attic for roughly 9 months.